Mr. Speaker, I'd like to start in my remarks on this point of order reflecting back on when we had a sessional agreement, which I think was brought in probably about 2001, 2002. I don't remember exactly which year. But I do remember that Marcel Laurando was the Conservative House Leader at that time, and that there were fairly extensive discussions which led up to that agreement. And there were a number of fundamentals of that agreement: that we would have a more organized calendar in which we started at the call of the government, and that we wound up in mid-June, and then where we needed, we could come back in September. And as I recall, for example, this is exactly what we did in 2007. That we wound up in mid-June. We had estimates to finish. We had bills to discuss. We came back in early September, and we completed that job. There was not an issue. I mean, I complained about the fact that we were starting late when I thought that we should have started earlier in March, for example, when we often started in April. But you know, that being said, we had a procedure which for a number of years was working. In 2013, an exception was made because there was declared an emergency in the middle of June. And that emergency was related to the increasing of the PST and the government feeling that they needed to get some legislation critically passed. And so we sat. We came back immediately afterwards, and it took us until September before the emergency was dealt with, and we were able to move on. I think that there has been a concern, and let's put it fairly, that we haven't been sitting enough days, and we in the Liberal Party have raised that on quite a number of occasions, and that we should be sitting more days. But we do have a procedure in place with the rules that we currently have, that if we don't finish in mid-June, there is the availability of calling an emergency session and putting the reasons on the table for why it is an emergency setting. If things are not an emergency, we are normally able then to come back in early September and to complete the job. That has to be done in terms of estimates and bills. I would say, Mr. Speaker, that you know, the measure that was put forward this morning, which you read out, and which I will just comment briefly, not wanting to go back into the previous point of order, but because it applies here, and that is that that measure was to give the leave of the House, if the House so decides, to sit in June, July, and August, and September, and October, and November, December. It is now up to the House to decide with an all-party agreement, and I would, with respect, ask the House Leader for the government to put forward a proposal, and rather than putting it forward, you know, as a resolution which is the government has only had input into, that the government House Leader talk to the other House Leaders and, you know, put the first suggestion down on paper, and let's all have a look at it. I think we all know that there's a lot of business here to do, that we are going to have to spend a lot of time in the next number of months in this legislature dealing with that business. Let's get the schedule decided so that we know what's going to happen, and let's move forward. Thank you.